Okay, hope all is well. We are continuing our Indisputable Truth book series. We are now on page 104 in the third edition of the book. We're on the purpose of life. Finally, we're here. We're basically at part 2 of the book. So part 1 was Torah Emet, proving that Judaism is true, proving that God exists, and that the Torah is from God. So just a quick summary of what we just said in the last part, and then we can start purpose of life. So we prove God exists. Now, if God exists, there must be, he doesn't do futile acts. There must be a purpose for why he created the world. And if there's a purpose for why he created the world, and we're the most complex beings in the universe, he must have communicated that purpose to mankind. Now, if he communicated that purpose to mankind, he obviously didn't do it nowadays. He must have done it, when mankind began. Okay? And if he did it when mankind began, and he and there's a purpose to life, and he told it to, our ancestors, whatever, let's say thousands of years ago, he also must make sure that it's being passed down generation to generation until today, because then what's the point of giving the purpose if it's just going to get lost eventually? So the idea is, we prove God exists. We prove that whatever that truth that's being carried generation to generation, that's still here today. Okay, that's where religion comes in. Religion claims to have that truth. We went through all the religions. We basically concluded that Judaism is the only God-given religion, and that the Torah is the instruction manual to life, and that and now, since we're on Judaism, right, any other way, shape, or form of Judaism, whether it's conservative reform, the Karaites, the Sadducees, any other breakaway of Judaism is obviously nonsense. The only right form of Judaism is what we call today Orthodox Judaism, Torah Judaism. And the idea is we came to the conclusion of God existing and the Torah is from God. Fine. Now, when you want to talk about the purpose of life, you can't talk about the purpose of life until you know that, God, told us that in the Torah. So that's why we went through all that background information to make, so that when we start talking about the purpose of life, people are going to ask, how do you know that's the purpose of life? Well, we proved that God exists and the Torah is from God. And God tells in the Torah what the purpose of life is. That's why we needed all that background information to get to this question. Okay, so purpose of life, let's begin. Imagine your spouse asks you to go to the grocery store to get some very important last-minute items before the guests arrive. You rush to the supermarket, find parking, grab a shopping cart, and then you enter the store. You suddenly forget why you are there. You blank out and forget the entire list. You call your wife, but she does not answer. You find yourself roaming down the aisle, sweating and hoping to remember something. You begin to feel down and depressed, not knowing your purpose and why you are there, and probably even frustrated. After 15 minutes of running around like a madman, you suddenly remember why you came in the first place. Your face lights up with a great smile. If this is the feeling you get in the supermarket, it is needless to say that how exponentially greater you will feel when you find out your purpose in life. The great differences between the two cases is that if you don't come home with the applesauce, you will survive. However, on the other hand, if a person comes to this world and does not know why they're here and what their purpose is, the consequences could be very tragic. There are people who have lived in this world for 90 years and still don't know what the purpose of life is. If a person doesn't know what the purpose of life is and why God created him, then it is very likely that this person most probably did not fulfill his purpose. Again, if you don't know the purpose, you're for sure not doing it. There's no way. Now that you know the purpose of life, I'm telling you, there's no way people are doing the purpose if they didn't learn about it. There's no way you would figure it out without, learning about it and going into the Torah. Okay, it's not something that's just obvious. It's something that you need God basically to tell you in the Torah what the purpose is. So let's go back. Let's continue. On the other hand, there are people as young as 13 years who know what the purpose of life is. And since they know what the purpose is, they have a better chance of fulfilling it compared to someone who does not know it at all. Who do we want to be? That's the question. You want to be the 13-year-old? You want to know the purpose when you're young, or you want to wait till you're 99 years old and one day before your death to figure out the purpose when it's already too late by then, right? The earlier the better. The bottom line is that we need to find out what the mission of life is so we could fulfill the purpose of why God brought us into this world. The most important question, what is the purpose of life? You got to figure that out. That's the number one question anybody can ask you. Why? Because that's your whole reason for why you exist. That's the reason why God brought you in the world. You want to figure that out, right? You don't want to go your whole life not knowing what your mission is. So what then is our purpose? Why did God create us? Why did he create the world? Before we answer this, let's address some of the common misconceptions of what people think the purpose of life is. Some people believe that the purpose of life is to have kids. If that's the case, then God could have made us animals such as dogs. Dogs also have kids, right? He could have made us animals. So that can't be the purpose, just to have kids. Of course, you're supposed to have kids, but that can't be why God created. Why God created the whole universe to have kids? For what? Some argue that the purpose of life is to be happy. If that is the case, then why are there so many people unhappy and on antidepressants today? God could have easily made us monkeys. Monkeys don't have any stress. They eat for free. They don't have to pay mortgage on an expensive house, pay tuition for their kids' school, or even have to spend a single penny on raising their kids. Again, of course we need to be happy. But you can't tell me the whole reason God created the world is to be happy. Okay, don't create a world. Don't create happiness. Don't create sadness. Just don't create anything. Just leave the world. Just don't make a world. Right? It's much easier. Then you wouldn't even have the dilemma of being happy versus not being happy. Or if again, God is not bored. He doesn't create the world out of boredness. But I'm just saying, okay, if He did create the world and the purpose is to be happy, well, most people are not happy. So what is the purpose? Okay. Some will tell you the purpose of life is to work to become rich. However, 99% of people throughout world history have not been particularly rich, and the few who have did not live great lives. So even people who are super rich, like everybody has some type of hardship or problems in their lives. Okay, fine. So what is the answer? Through all the evidence we gave in the previous sections, we see that there is very compelling evidence to say that there is a creator to this universe, and that He gave us the Jewish people the Torah. And then He gave the Jewish people the Torah. Now, if God exists and is running the world, then there must be some kind of instruction manual that He gave on how to live life. Imagine a person goes to a furniture store to buy an unassembled cabinet that comes with hundreds of pieces and different types of screws. The box that it's in must always include an instruction manual and consists of a step-by-step guide on how to perfectly assemble the item. Selling the item without including Selling the item without including an instruction manual. Selling the item without including an instruction manual is a recipe for a disaster and would drive the builder insane trying to figure it out. If this is the case with just a wooden cabinet, does it even make sense to believe that God would create this complex and awesome world, then expect us on our own to figure out what the purpose of creation is? Right? Just like the furniture store would not sell a cabinet without an instruction manual, God did not create us without clearly informing us of our purpose in this world. Again, if God created the world for a purpose, He's for sure going to let mankind know what that purpose is. Again, we're the most complex being in the universe. We're the only ones who can even think of that question of what the purpose of life is. Now, the only time in world history that God publicly spoke to mankind, i.e. the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, right? So when He spoke to mankind that one time in history, He gave them the instruction manual to life, the Torah, with clear directions on how to live our lives and fulfill the purpose on earth and what that purpose is. In fact, the word Torah comes from the word hora'ah, which means in Hebrew instructions. Okay, so Torah is instructions for life. Moreover, if God is an infinite being, there's no need for Him to create because He can't gain anything more than He currently has. So a lot of people say, oh, you know why God created the world? To serve Him. God doesn't need you to serve Him. He's not a homeless guy. He's not a king who needs people to make him food, right? He's a king who's infinite. He's an infinite being above space and time. He doesn't need anything. Okay? So if He created the world, He's obviously not getting anything out of the world from creating it. You can't give Him what He already has because He's perfect. He's infinite. Okay, infinite by definition is perfect. So therefore, since He has no reason to create the world for Himself, the obvious conclusion must be that He created this world purely for the benefit of His creation, which is us. To explain further, since God is an infinite being, He's not bound by any limitations. He lacks nor needs anything. Therefore, the creation of the universe must have been exclusively for the creation's sake, not the Creator. Just as a full, and I'm reading the footnote here, just as a full gas tank cannot benefit from extra gas, the creation of the universe cannot have created any benefit for God. It could have not given Him something in which He did not already have. To put it in simpler terms, when we do something for the sake of another without our own interest in mind, we consider it an act of giving. Similarly, we need to view God's creation of the universe as a complete act of kindness on His part, something He did solely for our benefit. Okay. So, if God created us for our benefit, then what exactly is He going to give us? What can God give us? What's the greatest thing if you're an alien from outer space? What's the greatest thing you could give somebody? The answer is pleasure. The best thing we could receive in life is pleasure. If we were to examine all the different psychological drives pushing people to do what they do, we would see that that it is all driven by a desire to acquire pleasure. So this is the example. Imagine an alien landed on Earth and observed all human pursuits. These aliens would see some people distracting their lives to be, sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. These aliens would see that some people dedicating their lives to playing basketball, some to saving whales, and some to working 12-hour shifts for a paper check. How does the alien make sense of it all? If this alien would spend some time interviewing people, he would discover something fascinating. Every human being in every one of their activities is just working in pursuit of pleasure. It must be that the pursuit of pleasure is built into our hardware. The alien would then make the assumption that if these humans had a manufacturer or creator, the manufacturer must have created them for this very purpose, to pursue and attain pleasure. Now, is the pursuit of pleasure a Jewish idea? Some say that it can't be. However, it is in fact our purpose. If you've never encountered this idea before, it may sound radical, hedonistic, almost anti-religious. Even those who are already familiar with Judaism sometimes need a refocus. We can get so caught up in the details of Judaism, that we lose sight of how the purpose of all of it is to attain the ultimate pleasure. So again, no one would think that's a Jewish idea. What? To attain pleasure? Yes. The whole purpose of life is to get pleasure. Judaism is about pleasure, but not just physical pleasure. All physical pleasures are limited. For instance, imagine going to a high-end steakhouse and trying the chef's most famous steak that costs $200. The person may enjoy every single bite of the steak and leave the restaurant on a high from physical pleasure. However, then, the person goes back a day later to the same restaurant. His enjoyment and pleasure of the steak is already going to be reduced. If the same person has a steak every day for 6 months, the same steak for every day for 6 months, eventually he will be nauseated by the simple smell of that steak. Interestingly, the person's pleasure will be decreased even though the steak itself never changed. It's the same steak made with the same ingredients and the same chef, yet the pleasure is limited and becomes increasingly less. Furthermore, it is human nature to never fully be satisfied from physical pleasure. The Talmud teaches us that there is no person that leaves this world with half their desires fulfilled. The one who has 100 wants 200. And the one that has 200 wants 400. It's a never-ending cycle where we are programmed to always want more. It seems that the best physical pleasures are short-lasting and temporary. Unlike physical pleasures, when it comes to spiritual pleasures, there's no such thing as too much. In fact, unlike physical pleasures, which diminishes over time, spiritual pleasures are not limited. Learning Torah is a great example of such an idea. For instance, anyone who begins to learn Talmud might at first struggle and only minimally enjoy it. However, over time, their enjoyment exponentially increases. This explains the fact that we have people in Judaism who are almost addicted, in a good way, to the experience of learning a page of Talmud. Some people have finished learning the entire 2,700 pages of Talmud several times, and each time it is more pleasurable than the time before. When we look at these people from the outside, it almost looks crazy and not logical. But if we take a step back and examine this type of pleasure, it is different from all other pleasures of this world we mentioned before, which worsen over time or eventually die out. The reason for this is that pleasure experience is not merely a physical one that is limited, right? So this pleasure that is experienced is not merely a physical one that is limited, but rather a deeper type of pleasure that has a spiritual component. Similarly, consider the feeling you had on Yom Kippur when you had a moment of connection, or when you saw the Western Wall, the Kotel, for the first time. It is important to note that these spiritual feelings, as great as they are, do not even compare to the spiritual pleasures that God promises in the next world. Just as parents want the best for their children, God wants only the best for us, His children. God implanted within all of us a certain tendency and a desire for pleasure. We naturally crave things that make us feel good. God offers man the opportunity for pleasure that is not temporary or addictive, but permanent and truly satisfying. If a person is spiritually deficient, then you have a void and feel the need to indulge in the wrong type of pleasures to fill in this gap. The Torah tells us that the purpose of life is to work on ourselves to become close to God, which is in itself the greatest pleasure that exists. God is the ultimate good, and He has the infinite ability to give. Even though God is perfect and doesn't need us, He created us because He wants to share this ultimate good. The only way that we can get this pleasure is by being close to God. In other words, being close to God, having a relationship with Him, is the ultimate pleasure that supersedes all the physical, supersedes all the pleasure in this world. So, guys, I know I read this a little bit fast, and I want to read the text, and just cover a little bit ground with it. But the idea is that the ultimate purpose of life, what is the purpose of life? What does Judaism say the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to be connected to God, to develop a relationship with God, to get close to God. And being close to God and developing that relationship with God doing that is the greatest pleasure that ever existed. It's the greatest pleasure. It's the greatest pleasure in the world. It supersedes all pleasures. So if someone asks you, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to get close to God, to connect to God. However way you say it, to get close to God, to have a relationship with God, right? Whatever way you want to say it, that's the purpose of life, to get close to God. Okay? And that is, getting close to God is the ultimate pleasure. However, since this world is finite and limited, the pleasures experienced in this world have limitations, while those in the next world, which are infinite, are much greater. This point can be described through a parable of a king whose life was saved by a peasant. To show his gratitude, the king wanted to shower the peasant with lavish gifts. However, the problem was that the peasant lived in a shack and could not house these gifts. So the king invited the peasant to live in his palace and lavished him with gifts there. Similarly, God wanted to bestow upon us the greatest good, but we can only get that when we enter God's palace, which is Olam Haba, heaven, the next world. Okay, so to summarize, therefore the purpose of life is to derive the ultimate pleasure from God. This is achieved by working on ourselves and fulfilling God's commandments. The place where we derive this ultimate pleasure from God is not here in this world, but rather in another world called Olam Haba. The goal of life is to get to this place and be attached to God. It is the ultimate utopian of pleasures. There are no other pleasures that can be compared to this. In the next world, Olam Haba, a person is connected to God and receives ultimate pleasures from this closeness. However, what truly is this ultimate pleasure? The Mishnah teaches us, the oral Torah, in Avot 4:17. One moment of pleasure in the world to come is better than all the life in this world. Meaning what? This means that if you were to combine every single pleasure in this world, such as eating, drinking, love, relations, drugs, sports, cars, entertainment, traveling, children, fame, glory, money, etc., all of the people who ever existed since Adam, the first man, it would not compare to one moment of pleasure in the next world. It is very hard for us to fathom such awesome pleasures. Again, not even to an ounce of pleasure in the next world. All the pleasure of this world doesn't equal to one moment of pleasure, of the feeling of the pleasure. That pleasure is infinite, while this pleasure in this world, no matter how much it is, no matter of the quantity and the quality, is always going to be finite. It is very hard for us to fathom such awesome pleasure. The reason for this difficulty is that we are physical beings, and the pleasures that God promises us for the next world is spiritual. Our attempt to understand those pleasures can be likened to a blind person from birth trying to learn the difference between yellow and green. If the blind person never saw any colors in his life, how would you try to describe the different colors to him? Similarly, we are physical beings living in a very physical world. We cannot easily fathom how one moment of pleasure in the next world can be billions of times more pleasurable than our favorite pleasure in this world. But forget even billions, infinitely more greater. Furthermore, God tells each and every Jew that everything he does is in order to test you through hardships to do good for you in your end. Deuteronomy 8:16. What does it mean to do good for you in your end? If life ends with a burial and it's lights out, then what will be the pleasure? A fancy monument at the cemetery? Is that all the hard work? Is that what all the hard work in this world is for? The answer is, as we know, is that this is God's promise of all the awesome pleasures. That what's this promise that God's giving us in Deuteronomy to do good for you in your end? It's God's promise of all the pleasures and rewards that await us if we adhere to His Torah. Additionally, it is also hard for us to understand the concept behind eternity, which is how long the next world is, Olam Haba. The Torah teaches us that our actions in this world define our entire eternity. Now imagine taking a huge professional football field and filling the whole stadium, the whole field from top to bottom with sesame seeds, and every billion years or whatever million years, every billion years a bird flies and takes out just one seed. How long will you think until the stadium is completely empty? Right? How long will that take? Billions of years? Gazillions of years? Take it like this. Take a billion football fields, fill them all with sesame seeds from the top to bottom, get a bird to come every 10 billion years and eat half a seed. It will take zillions and zillions and zillions of years. That's not even equal to 0.0000001% of how long eternity actually is. Now, which world does it make sense that God created us for? This world, which is 80 to 90 years of limited finite physical pleasures, or the next world, which is infinite years of infinite pleasure? Meaning, we have to choose. If God created us for pleasure, what do you think He created us for? temporary pleasure that's for temporary life, right? That's bound by space and time, or he created us to give us the infinite pleasure that's not only infinite in its nature, but infinite in time-wise, right? It is obvious that the next world is the true place to receive this ultimate pleasure from God. So why did God put us in this world? Just put us in the next world. Why did he create us in this world? If the ultimate world is the world to come, why did he put us in this world? The answer is that the only path to reach the next world is through this world. As our sages tell us, the world is like a hallway to the world to come. Avot, right? Perkei Avot, Oral Torah, Perkei Avot, 4:16. This world is only a minor hallway that we have to go through to get to our ultimate destination. The only reason we need to go through this hallway is because there's a certain currency we need to collect called Mitzvot. These Mitzvot are the only valid currency in the next world. After we leave this world, and after hopefully a productive and meaningful 120 years, we pay the Mitzvot at the entrance of Olam Haba, of heaven, like a child taking all the tickets to the prize booth in an arcade to claim his prize. Again, what's Mitzvot? We'll talk about that. But the idea is mitzvah, these acts, right? Mitzvahs. These are acts that connect us to God. When going to any stadium, the more you spend on a ticket based on how hard you work to earn the money, the better your seat will be. Similarly, in the next world, our spiritual pleasure and position will be determined on how much we spent, how hard we worked in this world doing the mitzvot and avoiding averot, avoiding sins. Some people will sit in the bleachers all the way at the top because they didn't work so hard. Some people will sit in the middle rows while others will sit courtside since they push themselves while in this world and maximize their potential. By the way, that doesn't mean heaven has limited seats. At a Laker game or whatever stadium you go to, it's limited. Yeah, the seats are limited. But in heaven, there's unlimited rows to sit courtside. In a sense, obviously metaphorically speaking. We see that. Okay, let's read this. We see that if pleasure is the reward for the effort invested, and the highest level of pleasure is relationship with God, then it follows that this must be the hardest to obtain and maintain. And this, of course, is where religion comes in. Religion has been a human perennial, not because people need a way of explaining the unexplainable, but because it's the deepest, most profound desire of every human soul to connect to its creator. Alas, few want to work for it because it takes a lifetime of struggle. It's not easy. If this is the greatest pleasure to acquire, just like you want to become a doctor, a lawyer, a businessman, you want to make billions of dollars, it takes hard work, right, to acquire that pleasure of whatever it is, to have that money, to do whatever you want, to go on vacation. Guess what? This is the greatest pleasure. It must be the hardest to attain. The Torah, and in footnote number 190, we say the Torah lists 36 sins of karet, which means cut off. That if a person does them, they lose their share into the world to come. If you want to see that, go to the Rambam in Hilchot Teshuvah, Laws of Repentance, chapter 3, halachas 6 to 14. And if you want to just search up online 36 sins of karet, because obviously there's some people, I forgot to mention this, there are some people who because of their negative actions get banned from entering the stadium. Okay, that means karet. There's some people who did such bad things, there's some people get banned from the stadium, right? So if you want to know what that is, search that up, 36 karet violations. Okay, now I'm going to finish, we're almost done. I want to just finish this page and we'll finish off with that. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of life is not just to get to the next world, Olam Haba, but to also try to make it to the highest level possible by grabbing as many mitzvot as possible. Okay, as mentioned, the true place to gain pleasure is in the world to come. However, this does not mean that a person is not allowed to have pleasure in this world. So, very, very big misconception. A lot of people think, if I want to become religious, if I want to, what does religious mean, by the way? Religious doesn't mean, I would dress black and white, I have to have a beard, I gotta study 10 hours, a day. I'm not allowed to go to work. I can't be a professional. No, that's not what religious means. Okay, or go on vacation or whatever, live a good life, eat good food, suffer. That's what people religious does not mean that. Religious means you believe in the 13 principles of faith. It means you study the Torah, the instruction manual. It means you keep the commandments of God. It means that you work on your bad character traits and help other people. That's what it means to be religious. So the idea is, just because the ultimate world is the world to come and we're trying to get that ultimate pleasure, that doesn't mean you can't have pleasure in this world. Unlike other religions which claim that in order for a person to be holy and go to heaven, one must abstain from physical pleasures such as eating, drinking, sleeping, marital relations, Judaism actually promotes those things. But how and when they are done is the key difference and very important. For instance, we're allowed to eat food, but it has to be kosher, and a blessing must be recited before and after. Nor can it be on Yom Kippur. Judaism also teaches us that relations with one spouse can be the greatest mitzvah, greatest commandment, and is considered a very holy act. However, when it's done in the way Hollywood promotes it, with no boundaries or rules, it can be a major sin. Judaism believes that God wants us to have pleasure, but it needs to be done in a permitted way. Judaism teaches us that you must take all the physical and elevate it by using it to help you fulfill your purpose in life. So, okay, misconception number one, before just summarizing what we said before. So, guys, Judaism is not here to make your life hard. God is not out to get you. I actually gave a whole class on this if you go on the channel, it's called Judaism is Not a Burden. The idea is it's not here to burden you. God's not an angry man in the sky. He's out to get you, to make your life hard. Judaism is here to give you the one thing, to help you tap into the ultimate greatest pleasure, which is the world to come, and also give you the best life in this world. That's why when you really read the Mesilat Yesharim, he says to get, the exact word for it, I'll tell you what he uses. Where's my book? Okay, actually I don't have my book on me, but he uses an exact word. Lehita negotano. I forgot the exact word for it that he uses. I'm not going to say it on the top of my head, but he uses the word, he basically explains not just to get pleasure in the next world, but also in this world. Okay? So there's no contradiction. You could, live a good life and all that stuff, and also be, be connected to God and fulfill your mission. Just because that's the purpose of life doesn't mean this world is meaningless. Okay? Judaism teaches us that you must take all the physical and elevate it by using it to help you fulfill your purpose in life. We have to understand that everything God created in this world, food, money, houses, medicine, gadgets, the sun, the moon, is here to help us fulfill our purpose in life. And if it is misused, it would only bring us down. We can't afford to get distracted from our mission. When we eat food, sleep, shower, exercise, or do any other physical act, it should be in order to help us reach our greater purpose. For example, when you eat food, it gives you energy for learning Torah and doing the Mitzvot. The best way to explain everything we just said is that a person is supposed to eat to live, not live to eat. The same reasoning applies to all other physical matters pertaining to this world. There are means to end and not ends in themselves. Okay, so we finished that. We finished the purpose of life. We finished the whole purpose of life. I'm going to just give a quick summary, but quickly. Next time, we're going to talk about how do you fulfill the purpose of life. But right now, we're just focusing on what is the purpose of life and how we know that the purpose of life is to get close to God. Now, if you want, I write here that if you want, look at the appendix to see the section on what is my unique purpose in life. I think that's actually good after you finish reading the entire book. That we have a whole appendix a section in the appendix talking about how do you fulfill not just there's a general purpose to life, but how do you fulfill your individual role in that general purpose. We'll talk about that when we get there to the appendix. But quickly, the idea is what? The idea is that let's summarize what we just said. Oh, I think I missed this. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of life is not just to get to the next world, but it's also to try to make it to the highest level by grabbing as many mitzvot as possible. I think I forgot to mention that. But okay, so a quick summary and we finish. Okay, now that we know the Torah is from God, the Torah, the instruction manual to life, tells us why God created the world. Why did God create the world? The ultimate good wanted to share his good. Okay, God created the world. He's the ultimate good. He can infinitely give. He wants to share his good. What is that ultimate good? Pleasure. That's the greatest thing you could give to anybody. But now it can't be physical pleasure is that greatest good God wants to give us. Why? Because that's bound by space and time. So what is that ultimate pleasure God wants to give us? It's the pleasure of being connected to him in the next world. So the whole purpose of life is what? To get close to God and to get to that ultimate pleasure. Now, if that's the whole purpose of life and that greatest pleasure is infinite in its nature, it's not bound by space and time, it's infinite in the feeling and it's infinite in the sense of it's forever, right? So why God created us in this world? This world's a hallway to the next world. The whole mission of this world is God gives us challenges, tests, right? So there's 4 categories: Torah, Mitzvot, character traits, helping other people. So he gives you different situations. He expects you to, just do the Mitzvot, do the good, avoid the bad. And based off how hard you work to do the good and avoid the bad, in your different scenario, everyone has different cases. Some people are born rich families, some people are born to poor families, right? Everybody has a different situation in their life, different things that their nature gives them, that their nurture gives them. And the idea is, based off who they are, where they're born to, what their city is, who their family is, their friends, their environment, God gives them things to do and things not to do, to do the positive, avoid the negative. And based on how hard he works to do the positive and avoid the negative is going to determine his relationship to God in the next world. Now again, does that mean, okay, fine, so this world's just a hallway to the next world that we have to collect mitzvot and grabbing as much as we can so we sit courtside in heaven, meaning to get to the highest levels of connection to God in the next world? Is that what it's all about? So is this world nothing? Is this world no nonsense? No, this world is important because obviously your whole life is determined on, it's like a test. Life's a test. And based off how hard you work and you have limited time, it's going to determine what you're going to be in the next world. It's going to be determine that. But not only that, God's not saying suffer in this world. God's actually telling you the opposite, that if you do the Torah and Mitzvot right, if you listen to the instruction manual, not only will you get the next world, but you have the best life in this world, the best marriage, raising kids, society, less anxiety. You're going to fix your bad character traits. You'll live a better life in this world. That's the whole idea. So we'll finish with that. That's the purpose of life. So if you wake up in the morning, someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, they ask you what your name is, you'll say your name in 1 second without a hesitation. Why? Because it's important information. Same thing here. If someone asks you, what's the purpose of life? In an instance, the most important question should be at the tip of your tongue. The purpose of life is to get close to God, which is the ultimate pleasure. And we're here in this world to work hard to accomplish that, to avoid, overcome our tests and challenges, do the good, avoid the bad. And based off that, we'll determine our relationship. Why? Because God wants to give the ultimate good, and that's what it is. Thank you so much for listening. We'll finish there.